Are you considering buying the forest? In this video, I'm giving you a full review of the game. So by the end of this video, you will have all the information needed to make an informed decision on whether or not this game is for you. I have played thousands of hours of survival games, including the forest, so I definitely know what I'm talking about. Now, the forest is an open world survival game, but it also has a horror element. The game starts out by you and your boy Timmy being in an airplane together, currently on a flight, when suddenly the plane crashes on an island. The last thing you see is your boy Timmy being taken away by some kind of freakish looking man. And after that, you are jumped directly into the gameplay, and that lines up for the story of the game. The premise of the forest is to survive the island and of course also find your boy Timmy. Now, the forest does this story in a very different way compared to normal games. They don't just give you a schematic and say go from A to B and follow a certain path. It is more of a you explore, you find items that then give you hints. So for instance, as you start exploring, you will find notes and photographs that'll give you background story of the island and also where Timmy is. And throughout the game, you will go through caves and you also start exploring on, for instance, on a boat, and these will have different hints for you. And the story is actually really solid. So in terms of the gameplay, it is a basic survival game. You have the whole thing of managing your food, your water intake, and of course setting up shelter. And of course trying not to die. And you can of course do this by crafting different tools. You can craft weapons and traps to help you hunt for animals. And the animals are actually quite smart, so be careful you don't try and chase them down. And the AI in this game is actually quite good. The animals will run from you, so you might struggle if you try and hunt them down by foot. And be careful you don't get outsmarted by a fucking lizard. You also have more stats than a typical survival game. For most survival games, you have health, hunger, thirst, but the forest also has other stuff like energy, stamina. Basically, are you physically doing okay? And they also have sanity. So when you first start out, you're doing well, you're a normal human being. But later on, as you explore through caves filled with body parts, you might even chop them up, you might even have to eat a leg or an arm, your sanity will drop, which I personally think is a major addition to the game compared to other survival games, because you also have the mental aspects of the game. I don't know about you, but if I were stuck in an island filled with cannibals trying to eat me and my son has gone missing, I'd probably go pretty mental too. So as you progress through the game, you will explore different areas. And the more you see and the more you interact with, the more you will learn. You will, for instance, learn what plants you can eat and what you can't. And you, of course, also want to explore it more and more. This will also be how you find hints for the storyline. And yes, there's a massive pit in the center of the island. And of course, like everyone else, I jumped into it. And that is a very long fall. But I'm not going to tell you what's on the bottom of it. You're gonna have to find it out for yourself. And when you're exploring, you'll find different kind of areas. There'll be different biomes. There'll be a snow biome. There'll be dense forest and plains. So the game makes you to run through the forest, take a stroll on the beach, maybe chop off the head on some turtles. You'll explore mountain tops. You'll find different areas with different kind of materials. For instance, lakes will have different materials around them and in them, which you, for instance, need to craft healing recipes. You'll also come across different areas containing different type of the cannibals. Most of the time, the cannibals you encounter will be the one that attack you. They will come to you. They are kind of the outcasts of the tribes, but throughout the island, you will find different tribes. So at the beach, in the mountains, in the snow biomes. And you can of course also explore their huts and see what kind of goodies you might find around these huts. Just be careful because they might get really angry at you for that. Cannibals do not run randomly around the island. There are certain patrol routes they take, so you want to be careful you don't settle your first establishment in the middle of a patrol route, because then you will get attacked very, very often. Trust me, I made that mistake the first time. It was not easy. So that could, for instance, be near the rivers or the beach. So one of the core gameplay of the forest is the building. Now, I actually really like this kind of building. You can actually make a lot of different stuff with the custom crafting. You can, for instance, make different wall types, etc. So you will start off with a simple shelter, a little hunting shelter with a fire pit, and then later on you can start mapping out massive structures. You can even map out and plan everything and where you want it before even using any resource on it, which is really, really nice. And then later on, you can of course make massive structures along with your friends, make entire fortresses, and try and survive all the cannibals trying to kill you on the island. This will even include setting up traps and putting up catapults to fire bombs at the cannibals. Now, the crafting in the forest is very unique compared to most games. You don't really get a recipe list as you would from other games. The way they do it here is that you try and combine things and then see what works. And then, for instance, after making an item for, let's say, a stick, you will then learn more recipes that requires a stick. So the further you get into the game and the more advanced technology you get, you'll unlock more and more craftable recipes because you're finding more materials. Now, the game doesn't really have a whole lot of different recipes for crafting. There seems to be about 50 to 60. But when you take that and then also add the fact that you find some of the items as well in caves, you have a lot of different items and things to craft. So early game, you will start off with your plain axe. But later on, you can craft your own, or you can find more advanced weapons in the cave systems. That also includes stuff like a katana, or you can even make a crafted club, or find a chainsaw, which you can of course use to cut down trees and also other things. But another point is of course also ranged weapons. Early game, you will craft a very basic bow, and later on you can find a more modern bow throughout the caves, and you'll also find stuff like flare guns or even pistols. Now where it gets really fun is the projectiles. You can actually craft Molotov, bombs, and dynamite to throw at enemies. So if they're bothering you enough, you can of course use that. And if that doesn't work, you can of course always just hit them with a rock. Is the game player friendly? So the game has quite a bit of a learning curve at first, because you don't really know what you're doing. You have no idea what you can eat, how do you craft, what different materials can you find, and where can you find them. But the premise of the game is easy enough to follow, since it is a standard survival game. So the early game of the forest is a lot of exploring, and you of course also want to set up basic shelter. Now where this game is different from other survival games is that you will have cannibals attacking you. Now they actually behave different from what you'd think. They are smart. They will try and study you and just look at you from far at first. You'll usually hear them before you can see them, especially in the first couple of days. Now of course the later you get into the game, they'll become more hostile. More of them will attack you, and there will also be different types that I'll show you in just a minute here. Now the graphics of the forest is a major plus. The way the trees move, the way the water looks is really nice. The overall visuals and the lighting effect is really nice, but one of the things this game does really well compared to others is the darkness. It is pitch black if you don't have a light source, and that especially ties into the cave systems. They feel very gloomy and very scary because they've really nailed on the light, and as well as the audio. They have really good sound effects in this game. Some of the screams from the enemies are so terrifying at first, and the music is also very solid for giving you an overall really creepy vibe. Now as you progress throughout the game, you will encounter different enemies. At first, the cannibals you will find on the island and in the caves will be the regular types, these pale skinny looking guys. But later on you will also find fire wielding ones, and you will even find crazy abominations like this guy called Armsy. Just look at this guy, it's fucking terrifying. You also find this scary looking guy who's got like 6 different legs, and I highly advise you bring some fire for this guy because he will throw out mutant babies at you. Yes, you heard me correctly, mutant babies. If that is terrifying, I don't know what is. And there's even crazier and scarier looking guys later on, but I'm not gonna spoil those. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like button down below, as it will help such a channel. Thank you. So you have 2 different worlds of the island. You have the island itself, and you also have the underground. There's a massive cave system underneath where you're so likely to get lost. It's incredible. And these caves are needed for the storyline. This is how you find some of the hints and the photographs that you need to unlock for the story. They will also have different materials for you, including weapons. So you can, for instance, find a grappling hook or a chainsaw to help you out with progression later on. And of course, the monsters. You have the big ass cannibals, because that's always fun being stuck in a cave with that kind of guy. Now for multiplayer. The random servers can be weird. All the players will have different progression throughout the story. There will be cheaters, etc. So I'd advise playing with a few friends. And it could be a total of 8 players. And of course, the more players, the more fun, right? It of course also helps with building massive fortresses, because you of course have more people to help you gather the resources. But of course, you also need more food, right? Just try and stay away from cannibalism at first. It gets dark. It can get real dark once you do that. What are the pros and the cons of the forest? So in terms of the pros, what I really love was the graphics. It looks amazing. Even for a game from 2018, it still looks incredible. They also nailed the overall mood. The atmosphere really adds to the horror part of the game, especially at night or in the caves. It is terrifying. It will make your hair stand on the back of your neck. They have solid surviving and building mechanics. So the way the overall food and water works is good, and this building is definitely up to par with other survival games. Now what are some of the cons? Now what I noticed the most was probably the hit scan. Sometimes you can hit an enemy and it's like you didn't get hit at all. You see the attack go through, but nothing will happen. And this also ties into aiming, especially with throwing your spear or shooting with your bow and arrow. The aiming can sometimes be very weird, and you have to aim either very high or very low depending on where the target is. But you can of course get used to it after a while. And there can also be some desync in multiplayer, so sometimes you will have to reset the game. But it is very rare this happens. So in conclusion, it is an overall very solid game. They nailed the survival part of it in terms of the mechanics for basic shelter, food and water. And they of course tried a different thing here of making a horror and a scary game compared to most survival games, but it definitely worked out for them. They made a great job in terms of the atmosphere and it feels scary. And the overall gameplay of mechanics in terms of building and crafting are also very solid. I would like to have seen a few more recipes and craftable items, but that might just be me. It will sometimes feel a bit clunky. It can sometimes feel like it is still an early access game, especially if you encounter some of the multiplayer bugs where you have to restart the entire game. It can definitely be a bit annoying. The story is surprisingly good for a survival game. Most survival games don't have a story, or they will just throw one together and just be done with it, but you can see they actually incorporated the story into the gameplay here, which gives a nice sense of progression, especially for a survival game. So I would highly recommend buying The Forest. It is an exceptional survival and also scary game, and it does both parts really well. If you like this video, hit that like button down below, share it with your friends, and be sure to subscribe. Also click the video on the screen now if you want to see more of my game reviews. See you in the next video.